Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad to be speaking to you guys today because this is a special Father's Day episode, and I love this time of year because it allows me to not only reflect on myself as a dad, but I also get to think about all the incredible men out there that are listening to the podcast, that are part of our Facebook group, that are contacting me in some kind of form or fashion through social media. And you're just great fathers. I know that. I know that about you guys. I see you guys posting pictures of what you do with your kids, and you're really just thoughtful, good men. And so I want to start off by saying Happy Father's Day to all of you. You very much deserve it. I know many of you come from backgrounds where you didn't have a good dad. You didn't have that influence in your life that you ought to have had. And at the same time, you're probably breaking some family, some lineage sort of curses, some generational issues by actually being a committed father to your kids, whether you're a stepdad, whether you're just a regular dad, whether you're an adoptive father, whether you're a father-in-law. It doesn't really matter. You're stepping in and you're taking on that role as father, and you're making a difference in your child's life. And so well done, men. Congratulations to you on this special day. And I wanted to talk to you guys. I wanted to just kind of say 5 ways that being a father really changes you, makes you a better man, and why I think that actually as a society, we're in a bit of hurt right now because people are putting off marriage and fatherhood until much, much later in life. And it's causing a number of issues, actually, where there's some repercussions here from this. And I'm really hoping that this podcast episode helps to kind of break up some of this thinking a little bit for some of you guys out there. If you're not a dad yet, you're putting it off for various reasons. And so I want you guys to be able to kind of break up the way you're thinking about your approach to fatherhood, what it means, what it's all about, and also understand the tremendous benefit that comes to you as a man when you become a father. And so I've got 5 ways that I want to talk about that. Before I jump into that, I do want to mention a couple of things. One, our Facebook group. I try to mention this as much as possible. You guys know that. And if you're not a part of our Facebook group, you're missing out, guys. There are a number of fantastic men having great conversations as part of a private Facebook group. It's free. The only thing you need to do to join is head over to wolfandiron.com/the group. And that'll take you over to our Facebook page. It'll kind of slingshot you over there. And there'll be a few questions for you to answer. This is the great thing about the group. We don't let everybody in. Not all the guys get in. Actually, we turn away more than we let in. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that the guys who are joining the group are really a good fit, that they're men of high caliber, that they know that this is really about men who want to grow, not just post memes all day and that kind of stuff that we see everywhere else. And so it really is a fantastic group of men. I'd love for you to be a part of it. The second thing is, I just want to call out a little bit the guys who have been putting off marriage and have been putting off commitment, have been putting off the idea of becoming a father, because you got this notion that that fatherhood has to wait, marriage has to wait until you got all your ducks in a row. You know, you got to graduate college, and then you have to get a career. And then after you get a career, of course, you got to meet the girl if you haven't done that already. And then you guys have to get sort of settled. Where do you want to finally be living? You know, you want to move out of that apartment and into a real house. And then, of course, you want to have some money in the bank, and then so on it goes. And the next thing you know, you're 50 years old and you don't have any kids yet. And look, you can have kids at any age. I'm a firm believer that being a dad is great at any point in life. But don't keep putting it off, because the longer you put it off, you're missing out on some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And I want you guys to know, you don't know how to be a dad yet. No guy does going in. But, you know, if the Lord entrusts you with the care, the stewardship of a child, then, you know, it's my belief that the man upstairs thinks you have what it takes. You got the raw materials, in other words, and you've got some learning to do. But guys, have faith, man. You can do this fatherhood thing, and don't put it off. Don't put it off because you want your life to line up. Okay. So let's jump into this. 5 ways that being a father helps you to be a better man. The first way that I can think of is that it makes you selfless. Well, it makes you more selfless. A lot of guys and gals, actually, we really approach life with a very selfish kind of mentality. A lot of our schooling, kind of career, going through all the way through high school and then into college and that kind of stuff, if you do that kind of thing, it really is focused around what's in it for you? Where are you headed? What's the thing that you're supposed to be doing with your life, right? And I don't think there's any greater wake-up call than to realize that the world doesn't revolve around you. Then when you have a child and that little baby is looking back at you and you're so aware that they are just absolutely dependent upon you. And you have these decisions to make. Am I going to serve me today and in this moment, or am I going to serve them, right? And just speaking from my own experience, this usually happens when the kid doesn't want to go to sleep, right? Like when the kid's first born, or the kid needs their diaper changed at whatever 30 at night, and you're fast asleep in bed, or the kid doesn't want to go to sleep, after 3 o'clock in the morning. And so you've got to stand up, you got to stay up with them and try to rock them and tell them stories and all this other kind of stuff. And you really get challenged very quickly with this understanding that I don't like having to give of myself to somebody else. This isn't a fun thing. This is where fatherhood sort of gets not that much fun, to be honest. But it challenges you in a good way. And you got to think, if you wait until, your 30s and your 40s to have kids, you miss out on this opportunity to grow and to become a little bit more selfless and a little bit more sacrificial and a little bit more giving to somebody else. And so I think fatherhood first challenges you to become selfless. And for the men who take up the responsibility of being a dad, they know this all too well. Not only are you serving the kid, a lot of times you're serving mom as well. And so you've got to really change and challenge yourself. And this really begins the journey of opening up your worldview to being more than just about yourself. And really most of the things that I'm going to be talking about going forward here, the other 4 items, are really centered around this point. All of a sudden, the world becomes much, much bigger. And as you invest more time into your child, you become more and more aware of the outside world. I remember thinking as a kid, listening to my grandfather, he'd listen to the radio, and of course it'd be talk radio, and they'd be talking about whatever the news type of stuff. I guess NPR was around back then. And I used to think, this stuff is so boring. Why in the world would you listen to politics? And why do you care about what's going on in the market and all these other kinds of things? And it changes you as you become a dad, because these things start to matter. And we'll get into that a little bit as I kind of talk about these next points. Number 2 on the list is that it makes you protective. And I think a man needs to have something to protect. Now, there's something to be said about, even as a single guy, or you're not a father, and you have some things to protect. Maybe you could say your reputation, but maybe you've bought a nice car for yourself, maybe you have a nice home. You can still achieve things, right? But it's rather materialistic at the end of the day. And I think a man really needs to have people in his life that he's protective over, starting with his wife, but then especially his kids. I mean, even our wives, some of you guys, you got tough wives, and you're thinking, man, she can handle herself better than I can handle myself. But in any case, your children absolutely need your protective covering. And once again, you got to realize as you begin to have kids, you become aware of certain deficiencies in your own character. I remember thinking a while back when my kids were little, my boys are 15 and 18 now, but I remember thinking, if there was a fire or if there was an earthquake or some kind of accident was happening, and I had to pick my kids up and run with both of them, one under each arm, out the door, could I do it? I'll tell you what, guys, that kind of stuff will keep you up at night. That'll make you want to work out. And so there's some motivation there that takes place in men when they know they have someone who's depending upon them, but also depending on dad for their protection. And it's still that step, once again, moving us from thinking about ourselves to thinking about the world, the larger kind of picture. Number 3 here is that I believe it makes men more conservative and possibly eventually libertarian. I'll kind of give you a bit of an illustration here. And I think this is really key. And I think you guys can see how delaying fatherhood and really not valuing fatherhood these days is having a tremendous impact on the political climate. It typically works like this. You have kids and you start working because you want to take care of your kids. If you don't already have a job, you should have a job. But either way, you become a little bit more career-minded as you have children. You want more stability. And at some point, it becomes apparent to you that you are trading in not only years of your own life, days and hours of your own life, but you're also missing out on these key moments of your children's life. I remember when my kids were young, going on a vacation. No, not a vacation. Going out, it was like a vacation to me, but going out of town for a few days for work and then coming back and then just seeing that my children had physically changed, but also their demeanor had changed. They were a little bit sharper, whether it was walking or talking, whatever it was, some kind of phase that they were going through. And I just remember thinking, man, I missed that. I missed out on that. Especially when your kids are young, they change so quickly. And it becomes apparent to a man that he's trading in hours and days and years of his children's life to go and work for somebody. And this goes on, this goes on, and this goes on. And this will make you become conservative in the fiscal kind of way, because you look at your paycheck and you go, okay, this is a lot of taxes that are being taken out of my hard-earned dollars here. And then you start paying attention to the political climate and what's going on. You go, I wonder how much of these taxes that were taken from me have just been squandered, right? How much of this has just been wasted on some, back-scratching government program, bailout, who knows what it is? What did I actually get for this? And it starts to piss you off over a period of time. And I'm convinced that the more you make and the more those tax dollars increase that are being taken out, the more you start to become actually a little bit more libertarian in your thinking, because you pay more and more attention to the news. And what you see is that the government is just about useless in most things. They seem to do a good job of collecting money, but not a very good job with all the other things that are going on. And so this makes you more fiscally conservative, but then you also become morally more conservative as well. And I think it kind of works like this. Your kids are young. You maybe are their primary influence. You and the wife, hopefully, are their primary influence. And you begin to think about what you want your child to be when they grow up. This awesome man, this excellent woman. And you start to become concerned about things that you probably didn't really think a whole lot about before. Things like, what do they watch? And what's the influence on them, right? And you actually see this pretty quickly in your kids. Things you would have dismissed probably even in your own life before, you see very quickly in your kids how quickly they are influenced by even other kids, right? You go to the daycare and the brats are there. Not your kids, of course, but the other kids, the brats. And your kid comes home saying words and with an attitude of no, and I don't want to, that they didn't have before. Where did they learn that from? They picked it up from somebody else. And then you begin to notice it even as your kids get older. A lot of times you'll see it more in their friends than you see it in your own kids. But their friends start to have conversations about things that you wish they didn't know about, sexual things or just crude things. And you think, okay, where did they learn this from? Oh, it was social media or television or what have you, essentially popular culture. And you become very aware that the people that you don't want your kids to hang around in life, there's a certain character aspect about them that you don't want to kind of cross over to your own children. And in fact, as the kids get older, you feel like there's a real battle. You're trying to teach some things, and they're getting all these negative influences from outside of the home. And so the conservative aspect of this, the morally conservative, says, let's reduce the number of negative influences. Now, some people wrongly try to do this through government regulation. That's one of the things that separates conservatism from libertarianism. But however you approach it, the issue still is the same. You recognize that in order for children to grow up with the right moral foundations and structure, they need to have that influence consistently in their life. And so typically guys become more morally and fiscally conservative. Now this is a spectrum for sure. But I would bet that most of you, even if you still vote Democrat, you would say you've become more conservative minded since having kids, not the other way around. And so what we have right now in America is that we've got a lot of 30-somethings out there that haven't reached this stage of maturity. They don't have this perspective They're still thinking very much about themselves. It's a very individualistic mentality, and that's very American. I get that. I champion that, actually. But there's also the real thing of families and the influence on the next generation, and who's really providing that influence. And if the family is being overruled by media and everything else out there, then things have just flopped, right? Things are bad. That's not the way it ought to be. And so we have a lot of people who are of voting age and have been for many years that really don't have strong family values instilled because they don't have families of their own. And so we see a lot of the challenges that we see today with the increasing, more liberal leaning of the government. Larger programs, take care of me, provide things for me, do things for me. Okay, so I don't want to get on a soapbox there, but typically people become more conservative as they have kids. Now, number 4 here is ambition. I think that having a family actually gives you some ambition because it gives men some direction. Now, you and I all know the guy who has basically settled, right? I mean, that's one of the things we talk about, settling down. You're going to have kids and settle down. And I think that's for the man that doesn't really understand what it means to be a father and to be the leader of his home. But for the guys that do, there's actually a lot of ambition that comes as being a part of being a dad. For me, we homeschooled. My wife stayed at home with the kids. And when I say stay at home, that's sort of like antiquated, I guess, in some ways, because it's not really true. They were all over the place. But I was the primary breadwinner. If we wanted to have newer, nicer things, then that meant I had to bring in more money to make that happen. And that does increase the ambition, but it also gives guys direction. Having kids, a lot of times, kind of boxes us in. So as men, we have these 2 challenges, these 2 drives. One is we want to go and conquer the world. And if left to our own devices, that's really what we do. We just go and do all the cool, amazing things and not really worry about raising a family. And certainly we need men like that in society. But for the most part, we need guys who are willing to stay home, to be family-centric fathers for a long period of time as their kids are being raised. But we need those guys to also have some ambition to grow in their careers and start businesses and things of that nature. So I believe actually having sons and daughters and having that family, it sort of reins us in a bit. And it helps us to kind of focus a little bit more on what are the things that we really, really want to do, both short-term and long-term, and how do I make that happen within the context of still caring for my family. And so it's not just an anything goes kind of ambition. It really is saying, how do I achieve goals while also still staying focused on the things that really matter the most? Some of the most directionless men that I know don't have families. They don't really have anything to ground them. And it's almost like their choices are too open. They can go do just about anything. And I don't think that's actually serving them very well. So having a family can give you ambition. It can give you some motivation, but it can also give you more direction as to what it is that you want to do. And as men, we certainly need that. And lastly, and I think this is the most important thing, number 5, being a father helps you to understand the Father. I'm talking about God here. There are so many stories in the Bible that I knew from being a kid. I grew up in the church. There's so many stories like the prodigal son and just hearing about the Father's love and things like that you kind of get, but I'm going to be honest with you, you really don't get it until you have your own kids. Now, I think that maybe uncles can get this to a degree, and I think that maybe as people just get older, they sort of understand this a little bit more. But it's easier to understand these scenarios and the idea of God as a loving Father when you've actually been a father yourself. And it's easy to understand how scenarios such as we discipline our children because we love them, those kinds of things. And it's easier to understand things like no matter what your child does, you can't stop loving them. You could even be really disappointed in them. I mean, I just think about the parents who've got a kid out there that have shot somebody in cold-blooded murder, and they're just a terrible, terrible human being. And the parent is just so ashamed of them and so disappointed in them, but at the same time so broken because they love their child. And it doesn't matter what the kid does. They can't stop loving the kid. They're always going to be their child. And so when you become a father, you become aware of this. And I think really more so over the years, because there are more examples where your kids do stupid things and you think, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated with you right now, but I really want the best for you and I really, really love you. And guys, I think this is key. As I start off saying, many of us, we didn't have the best father figures. And so growing up from the son's perspective, it may be difficult for us to imagine, that prodigal son's father, right? Who's standing, waiting for his son to return. He's looking afar off. I just imagine this old Jewish man, going out at breakfast, in the morning with his, I don't know if they had coffee, but whatever they drank back then. And he's sitting out there and he's just looking off, staring for an hour or so as the sun rises, just looking over the hill to see if his son's going to show up. And as strangers come by and whatever, he gets excited. And, oh, no, that's not my boy. But he's there and he's waiting, right? And from as a son's perspective, it can be difficult if we didn't have a good father in our life to really understand what that's like. We can understand that that's the story, right? It's a parable, but we can't really understand the heart behind the dad, because that word father kind of trips us up. We're thinking about God the Father, and also this wonderful dad that just waits for his son to come home. And we have a hard time getting those things to line up. But as you become a dad yourself, even as you screw up as a dad, we don't all get it right all the time. There's still an aspect there where you can start to grasp how much you would miss your boy or your girl. And especially if they had gone off doing some stupid stuff and you don't know if they're dead or alive, and you just think, man, I want such good things for them, and I can't wait to see them home, and I don't care what they've done or how they've screwed up. I just want them to show up here, and I'm going to love them, and I'm going to hug them, and I'm going to forgive everything, right? You start to get some of that when you become a father yourself. I'll tell you what, man. I've made some mistakes as a dad, big time mistakes. And, I've approached fatherhood out of fear of being like my dad. I've approached it out of fear of how I'm seen as a father by other dads that I know, right? If my boys aren't in line, then it's a reflection on me. And I've done some stupid stuff. There are days I wish I could get back and do all over again. But there are moments, man, when you're just so proud. I'm just so proud of my boys. And I know I had something to do with that. And I know that even though I've screwed up a lot, and who knows, maybe years down the road, counseling, things will come out and I'll have to fess up to it and ask for forgiveness for things that I don't even know that I did. I'm just so happy to be a dad. There's nothing like it in the world. I'll tell you that. Ask any man who's a father, he'll tell you the same thing. It absolutely changes your world. And so, men, look, if you're a dad, I hope these things hit home. If you're not a dad yet, well, don't rush things. Don't go out just to become a dad, but also don't put it off because you're worried or because you're waiting for things to line up just right in life. I think some of the greatest influences on sons is that they see their father change over the years. I had kids young enough, so we started having kids when we were in our early 20s. And, my oldest, at least, 18-year-old, he can say in the last 5 to 7 years, he's seen a change in me. He's seen me mature, right? And I think that's powerful, guys. I think it's big time powerful. That can happen when you become a grandfather. A lot of times it does. Your kids recognize that you don't parent the same way you used to. You've matured. You're doing things. You're talking differently. You're more patient. You're more kind, what have you. But it can happen when you're a dad as well. So, men, if your father's still around, go out and love him. Give him a hug. Send him a card. Give him a phone call. And if you haven't become a father yet, seriously consider it, man. I think it's a big part of the high call. All right, fellas. I love any feedback from you guys. Leave a review. Make sure you subscribe. Do all that kind of stuff. Happy Father's Day to all the men out there who are dads holding it down. And until next time, keep your powder dry. And may a fair wind be always in your sails.